This is the Sunday stream opening song because the other song is copyrighted. La 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 la. Oh look, here comes Dog Cat Fox.
Hi, Sky.
Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the Sunday stream. The stream I do on Sundays because Sunday is the day to stream on Sundays. Hope you're all doing well this beautiful Sunday morning. Hopefully you're all relatively even temperatured. I know it's hot out there somewheres. It's relatively comfortable here for the moment, but you know, that can all change in a day or two. Either way, hi. Oh, it's been a busy couple of days for me. I'll be talking about part of it near the end of the show, if I remember to. Remind me if I don't. But either than that, okay. My brain's still waking up, even though I've been up for a couple hours now. I haven't been doing any hard thinking all morning. So now is the time to really put my brain to work. Yes. But who's joining me for this wonderful exercise in brain athletics? Matt Barnes, Johnny Hellcat, Noah Asensio, Keever Dam, Rib Rascal, pardon me. Let's see, Mike R., Ryan R., Together Again, Evil One, Roger Reynolds, Spoonie the Rebel, and I think that's everybody I see presently. Sorry, I keep saying Rob, I apologize. Rib Rascal has a problem. I have Star Trek theme song in my head. Top 10 theme song. THG1 is crap. The THG? Isn't that the ingredient in, like, marijuana? I don't know. Either way, apologies for your song stucking in head. Liesel7, Ken Elliott, Sabian187, good morning. Good morning to you. Good morning to you. All right, so what do we have on deck today? Well, this is amazing, guys. It's rare that I come across something with a title so blatantly WTF that I just have to go into it. A new book has been released in the last, I don't know, short amount of time. Learning and Teaching While White. I can't imagine what that's like, or what that means, which is why I'm so curious. Yeah, new book, and I have an interview with the authors. And yeah, this is making the rounds. This isn't the only instance of this book coming up on the YouTubes in the last week or so. This is one of at least 3 videos posted about it. And I'd never heard of it. But as soon as I saw the book title, I was like, oh boy, are we trying to compete with Robin DiAngelo? Are we going to get into some white fragility or something? Let's see. Thank you for damn cute. GoFundMe's are in chat. Yes, and I thought I posted them. I thought I had. I apologize. I had thought I pinned them. Okay, well, thank you, Keever Dam. My mistake. Yes, up in the top of the chat box, guys, if you take a look at the GoFundMe links posted there for our friends Shady Grin, Angry Illinoisian, and His Kitten. If you have a couple of bucks to spare, they, their friends, and loved ones would certainly appreciate it. Thank you so much. Let's see, a couple more hellos. Mike Savage, Megan Ring, No Name, and did I miss anybody? I probably did. If I did, I apologize. But yes, what can we learn about what it means to learn or teach while white? Well, let's find out together. A quick editing note. I did take out a small section at the beginning where the initial speaker was going over some procedural stuff and Q&A and what to say in the chat and all that kind of thing. So that's all that's been taken out of this. The whole thing runs just under an hour. I doubt we'll get to it all, but I'm sure that between now and 9:30 my time, we'll have more than enough to chew on. So with that, let's get right into it. I'll start off with a few seconds for a sound test. You guys tell me if you can hear it, and then we will proceed.
Hello to everyone. Thanks so much for being here.
I'm glad you're here too, and thank you for the thank you. You guys hear that all right? Let me know. Ostzan, good morning. Anybody else I missed in the meantime? Well, anybody I haven't said hello to, or those of you who are lurking now or in the future, good morning. Sounds good, says Mike R. All goose, says Evil One. Sounds fine, says Keeverdam. Keeverdam has a much more distinguishing palate. Everybody else is good. She says it's fine. All right, let's get into it.
My name is Meredith. I'm the marketing manager at Norton Books and Education, and we're just so excited to have this book talk today with the authors of Learning and Teaching While White. And Dr. Kim Parker is joining the conversation. I will turn it over to Carol, who is the editor of our Norton Books and Education.
Okay.
Okay. Well, greetings. As you heard, I'm Carol Collins, education editor for Norton Professional Books, and standing in today for Paul Gorski, series editor of our Equity and Social Justice series and the founder of the Equity Literacy Institute.
The Equity Literacy Institute. I'm curious to know what they do for a living.
The series, curated by Paul and his co-editor Cheryl Matthias, is a publishing home for books that apply critical and transformative equity and social justice theories.
Critical and transformative social justice theories. Critical. Where have I heard that word recently when it comes to education?
To the work of on-the-ground educators.
Aha.
I noticed on Paul's website that he identifies himself as an assembler of amazing people.
Oh, so he's like Nick Fury. Oh, okay. He's the Nick Fury of social justice equity literature. Great.
And that is certainly true of the panel assembled here today. We're very excited today to celebrate the launch of Learning and Teaching While White, Anti-Racist Strategies for School Communities.
Yeah, Learning and Teaching While White, Anti-Racist Strategies. Let's all consider that notion for a second. The title with its subtitle, Learning and Teaching While White. Whittling everybody down to skin color, but this is supposed to be an anti-racist initiative. Now, we're not monolithing anybody here on the basis of one non-determinative factor of their makeup. No. This is anti-racist. Okay.
The newest addition to the series. On the panel today are the authors, Jenna Chandler Ward and Elizabeth Denevy, and moderator Dr. Kim Parker.
Okay.
Many of you will know Jenna and Elizabeth as the co-founders of the popular professional development site Teaching While White.
Well, I wasn't until now, but now I guess I'll have to check that out too. Professional development, Teaching While White. Man, all right.
They are both long-term educators and diversity consultants.
Oh, they're diversity consultants too? Oh boy, they're the full package. Oh, they're educators and diversity consultants, and they're going to educate us on what it means to learn and teach with a particular skin color. Oh, glory be.
Asked me not to read their resume, so I won't do that.
Why?
And
Wait. They've asked you not to read their resumes. What?
While White. They are both long-term educators and diversity consultants, but have asked me not to read their resume, so I won't do that.
Okay, now I'm very curious to know what's on their resumes. Are they withholding reading them because they're very long and detailed, or for some other reason?
And Dr. Kim Parker is an educator and mother, director of the Crimson Summer Institute.
Educator and mother doesn't, being a good mother, that's one thing. Just being a mother, not exactly that complicated.
Academy at Harvard, and author of a very widely used book at this point, Literacy is Liberation, Working Toward Justice Through Culturally Relevant Teaching.
Culturally relevant teaching. Is that like cultural competency or cultural proficiency in schools? I wonder.
And with that, I'll go away and turn the conversation over to these wonderful panelists.
Okay, let's go.
Yay. Thank you, Carol. Welcome, everyone. Jenna, Elizabeth, happy book birthday. I'm really, really excited to talk about your book, which has just been so refreshing and important. And as I said before, I really think that every white educator I know needs this book today, and parents and everyone else.
Oh, every white educator you know. Oh, okay. I am honestly... Oh, and look how convenient. She has the moderator's book prominently displayed on the shelf behind her. Literacy is Liberation. And yeah, okay, that's great. All right. Thank you, Matt Barnes. 2 years of junior college is nothing to sneeze at. Don't be bashful. Sorry, I'm a facetious threat. Yeah. Yeah. I don't read our resumes. Why? I mean, maybe it literally is just for time's sake. Maybe there's just too much there and it's a waste of time or something. I don't know. I just found that kind of an odd thing. I mean, if you're not going to read their resumes anyway, why even mention that you're not reading their resumes? I don't know. Finally, thank you, Matt. Every white educator you know, huh? So it's useless for you, I suppose. Okay.
So I have some questions, and then we'll
too.
have some time to also take questions from the audience.
Mm-hmm.
And what I will say is that everyone needs their book, and I will hopefully be reminding folks that while we have this conversation, the goal really is to get this book into as many educators' hands and everyone else as possible. So,
you know, depending on what the contents of the book is, and given the title, that might be a very disturbing thought.
Let's buy your book. Okay.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Uh-huh.
You two have written a successful blog, Teaching While White. Can you talk a bit about why you decided to expand and write a book?
I'd most like to know first why they decided to start a blog called Teaching While White, but I suppose maybe we'll get to that.
What are you able to do with the book that you can't do with your blog?
Distribution, monetization. I mean, it's hard to monetize a blog as much as it is to monetize a book. You know, ad revenue only gives you so much, but book sales, especially if you can put it into the realm of virtue signaling like you've done for every educator needs this book in order to be a better teacher while white. Oh man, there's so much more money in books than there is in a blog.
I'll start. Thank you, Kim. I want to start by thanking you, Dr. Kim Parker, and to say that your book, Literacy is Liberation, is a must-read for all educators. I just need to say that.
Yeah.
Thank you. Our blog, we started about 5 years ago, Elizabeth, and originally we were talking about how are educators making whiteness explicit across the country? What are best practices? Is anybody talking about whiteness explicitly in their classroom?
Oh, I can answer that question. The answer was at 2017, this is 5 years ago. The answer is yes. Yes, I have quite a few videos between 2016 and 2017 on that very subject, if you can believe it. So yeah, but you didn't think there was enough of talking about whiteness in classrooms. Okay, all right.
So I said, let's start a blog and see what happens.
Okay.
See what's going on across the country. And so we, of course, have tried out some of our own writing and our own thoughts about it over time. And it was sort of snapshots over time. What are we doing now? What's changed? What have we learned in the last whatever period of time? The blog also hosts authors of color. We hear from educators all over and from parents as well. Authors
of color. You know, for an initiative that says it's anti-racist, you sure put people into boxes of race fairly readily, don't you?
And we really wanted to start to fill in some of the gaps of what's not on the blog and just share our own experience and hope that it inspires others to keep moving forward and discovering more in this work of anti-racism in education.
Well, thank you for that detailed explanation of what you were doing. Can you explain to us how it is anti-racist to divide people up on the basis of race? I know I'm asking rhetorically, but I always wonder.
Anything I missed, Elizabeth?
Well, I think it was also really exciting to be able to join the social justice series via Norton. So I think to have that opportunity to be able to have some of the work we're doing sit in conversation with other techs about how we can increase social justice teaching. I think Jenna and I really want to be part of a larger community as much as we can.
Yeah, you want to get as much of a market share as you possibly can. Want to join in on the craze. When did I'm not to be too conspiratorial, but I have to wonder, when did Robin DiAngelo publish White Fragility? Because I know it wasn't that long ago, but I have to wonder, how many other people did that success inspire to start going down that road into, racial literature, let's call it, whether it's blogs or books or otherwise. I wonder what the timing was between that blog appearing and White Fragility going big time. I don't know. I don't remember off the top of my head. Someone in chat, if you can find out what the Rib Rascal 2011. Okay, all right. So it was a few years before. Okay, all right. I don't know. I just there always seems to be these mystic chords of memory between one thing and another and all these concepts, and so anyway.
And we've had the opportunity to have an amazing advisory board to work with, and I think then to write the book became this way of just provides more community. And I want to echo the thank you that Jenna had to you, Dr. Parker, for being here with us today. It really means a lot because we also really want to be modeling these conversations in cross-racial dialogue. I also think this is an opportunity to model the very thing. Even though the book is predominantly written for white people, we also hope it helps folks of color be able to have these conversations with their white colleagues, of which there are a lot of us.
Which is obviously a problem that needs to be solved. And how do you solve for that problem? There are a lot of us. Yes, we are a monolith. We all think alike. We're all exactly the same because of our skin. Listen to this. Anti-racist, huh? Okay.
And so being able to have those opportunities and to be with you today and be able to model that is really powerful for us as well.
I'm sure it
Thank
is.
you. And I love, first of all, I can't believe Teaching While White is only 5 years old. In my head, it's been around forever, right? Decades.
That sounds like a personal problem.
So I look at that blog as just such an important part of sort of my own educational work, because what I've always valued about it is that when I've been like, why aren't white people saying something? Here y'all come. So,
why aren't white people saying something? Here y'all come. Oh, boy. Let's see, a couple more good mornings here. Vero Vashmadai, Old Guy Gamer. Anybody else? Tyrannus Alexandrius Invictus Soul. And anybody else? Let's see. Theater Wench Ginger. Theater Wench Ginger. So, are you a redhead that likes going to the theater, or are you like playing a wench in the theater while being ginger? I don't know. Dax Orion, good morning.
So I think that's really important. And I love too that your book expands on on so many of the topics that on the blog, I'm always like, oh, that's it? There's so much more. And so here we are. So I love that.
Okay, can we get past the mutual petting and get on to the content?
And Elizabeth, I love how you talked about the need for cross-racial dialogue.
Oh, I'm sure you're really ecstatic about cross-racial whatevers.
And you are explicit about that in your book as well. And I wonder if you two could say more about why white people need to work on their own whiteness.
Johnny Hellcat says that book was published in 2018 from what I'm seeing. Oh, White Fragility? Yeah, I thought it was something... no offense to Rib Rascal. I was pretty sure it was published relatively recently, at least within the time since I started my YouTube channel. But they say they started in 2017, so that was before White Fragility. So okay, I set aside whatever conspiracy theory I might have had, but it was the time for starting to try to monetize and drum up more racial divisions, especially in education, because I was seeing it back when I was starting to do Curriculum of Fear. Which I guess this episode is ostensibly a part of. But yes, tell us more about whiteness.
So I think part of it really stemmed from our own experience of growing up and not talking explicitly about race. And even more sort of terrifying getting into teaching and never being asked to talk about our race, right? So.
Oh yeah, heaven forfend in the course of your growing up, Seeing other people or evaluating yourself on the basis of skin color never came up. Gosh, we must fix this problem, don't we? We have to talk about race. We have to look at each other on a racial level and assess each other in that way. If we're not doing so, we're doing something wrong. That's why we're anti-racist. Oh, boy. Let's see here. I got a question for you guys, because I can't tell. The background music, can you guys hear it right now? Is it too soft? Is it too loud? Because I want it to be there. I want it to be noticeable, but I don't want it to be, like, overwhelming or entirely underwhelming. And I know I'm taking a moment out of the show for, you know, a group test thing here, but let me know. Can you hear the background music? Ryan R. says, no, can't hear it. Hear it a little bit. Okay. You hear no music? Okay, I'm going to put it up just a little bit. Because I want it to be there. You know, I want it to sort of, like, fill in the blankness of the background. Okay. Okay, now I hear it a little, says Ryan R. I want to find, like, the optimum level so I don't have to keep guessing going on in the future. All right. And, wait, is Satsu here? Did I miss that? Satsu, are you here? I can't see you on the chat. But if you're here, hello, Satsu. All right, I'm going to leave that there.
So there I was teaching an ethnic studies class, teaching an ethnic voices class about all texts dealing with race and ethnicity, and never really had to think about my own racial identity.
Racial identity. Well, here's a tip for you. I don't know if you know this, but racial identitarianism is poison. Doesn't matter what race you are. If you whittle yourself or others down to race as a factor of identity, you're going in the wrong direction.
I did a lot of harm in that class.
You did a lot of harm. How? How?
And so I think having the opportunity really for white people to be able to think about why their race matters, that I don't just walk into the classroom as, oh, I'm teacher Elizabeth, and here I am neutral ground, and I'm just filling the cups up in front of me of these beautiful children with all this great knowledge about literature and history, which was actually the way I was taught how to teach, that's what we were doing. And so I think we really wanted to have a space for white people to be able to think about their own racialized identity, what their experiences were, how their race shows up in the classroom, despite believing themselves to be good people. And we can talk more about that too, if that's helpful.
Oh, but of course they're not good people immediately because they're white or something. Yeah, how does your racial identity show up, your racialized identity? Are you listening to yourselves? What? Yeah, it constantly boggles my mind how grown adults who have, I assume, and maybe I'm setting myself up for a fall there, I assume have some notion of history, some notion of the civilization and civilizations we have, you know, witnessed over the course of human events, and yet you want to promote racial identitarianism. You want people to sit with their whiteness or whatever the heck else. It's gross. Thank you again, Matt Barnes. That music makes me feel like I should order Old Fitzgerald neat and smoke a Camel non-filter while I'm at it. Yeah, it took me a long time to find a copyright-free track that had sort of a calming, loungy kind of sense to it. I didn't know if I should find one for like each show that has a different mood, but this is just sort of a very neutral, relaxing background kind of thing. So I didn't want to be like all moody and mysterious or something. I want to be like, try to lift my spirits in the course of listening to some ridiculousness. But okay, you wanted to find a space for white people to really find their racialized identity, huh?
But I think really wanting to have a place to say, oftentimes we heard from white teachers, well, I want to be there for my students of color. I want to help them, right? I want to make sure I see them. And I want them to be there for all their students. But when you're a white teacher and you don't understand that your race matters or that you even have a race, it becomes very difficult then to have an authentic relationship with a student for whom race is really salient and really important and really impacts their experience moving through school. It's almost like we don't then have a language to talk to each other anymore.
Well, yeah, obviously, because if you have a person of one skin color and you have a person of a different skin color, you obviously can't have a conversation with each other without first acknowledging that you have different skin colors. It's really salient to all these kids. You know why it's salient to all these kids? Because you guys keep teaching them to pay attention to it and value it for some reason. That's the only reason this is of salience to any student these days. Is you're drilling into their heads to think of themselves first and foremost as colors. Can you imagine who's doing that? Is it so salient to them? Because they're moving through it every day. Yeah, who's creating that environment? Who's creating that culture, might I ask?
Because race is sort of not in that conversation. So I think we really wanted to create that space. I think it's the book we wish we had had when we started teaching. It was all the things that we learned along the way that somebody could have told us a long time ago that could have made us much better teachers.
Really? Much better teachers? Okay, so you're better teachers now than you were before because you wallow in this self-imposed, self-generated, pulled out of the ether racial identity, which you think says something about you. And then you project this onto anyone else who has a similar skin tone. You're a better teacher now because of that. Okay. Got it.
Jenna, do you want to add to that?
Yeah, I'll add that it was a really mind-boggling shift for me to understand that whiteness was the norm.
Whiteness was the norm. Oh, okay. Well, what does whiteness mean to you? You know? Because if I talk to a white guy in Texas, and then I talk to a white guy in Romania, obviously, I'm having a conversation with the same person. It's magical that way.
That had never even crossed my mind. Deciding what skills we value, what books we read, how we evaluate teachers, colleagues, how we deal with families, right?
What skills? Books reread? Family? What are you talking about? And boy, my pause game is on point here. I think even she's like, "What are you saying?"
And what we think is appropriate for family interaction.
What?
All of it is sort of predicated on this bed of whiteness that never was made explicit to me. And so I really was like, we need to shine a light on this so that everybody knows this is a thing, that it's not just neutral, that we're starting from a set of values.
A set of values? Okay, what values do you attribute to white people? What do you know about someone simply on the basis of their skin? You're walking down the street and you see someone and you can see their skin color. What values do you know they possess? What skills do you know they possess? What books do you know they read? What interactions with their family do you know they have? I'm fascinated to find out.
And how do we make that explicit?
I love it.
What?
I love it. You also are really explicit about the need for white teachers to work with white students.
Oh, are you? I'm sorry. This lady's eye game here is just crazy. Okay. White teachers need to work with white students, you say? Huh. I seem to remember some, what was that called? Oh, yeah, Brown v. Board of Education. What was that all about? What was that all about? Okay, you're advocating for what now?
And I wonder if you could talk about that. And also, Elizabeth, if you want to circle back to the being good people part, if you want to work any of that into it, great.
Yeah, please tell me how white people are inherently bad, or inherently think of themselves as good and are therefore flawed with their own egos. Tell me more about that.
Yeah,
I would love that
I think
too.
I think what we often hear from teachers is, look, they might know that racism exists, so they'll say it's this terrible thing out there, and thank God they're teachers and they're in their classrooms where there's no racism, right? Like somehow they've escaped, the influence. And I think,
yeah, I mean, I know witchcraft is out there, but I know I'm not a witch. Oh, think again, non-believer.
that's how I grew up. So if I was a white student back in the day, going forward, I would have just been Elizabeth. I had no idea that my race mattered. I was sitting in that classroom not thinking about all of my K-12 teachers were white, except for 2 language teachers.
Oh, and what does that tell you?
I didn't have my first Black professor until I was in graduate school.
Oh my God. And so what does that say about the people that taught you previously? And what does that say to you about the person in graduate school?
And not ever thinking that any of that mattered. So,
oh, heaven forfend that you don't assess people on the basis of race. Oh, God, terrible, terrible thing. Why don't you set us all aright?
I think that whole notion of teachers think they're good people doing good things, which they are, but we can be really good people and be complicit with racism operating in our classrooms, because generally the way racism works is it hides it, right? We don't talk explicitly about it, like Jenna said.
Really? Racism isn't explicit. Actual racism isn't explicit. If you truly believe in some sort of racial differential, it's not explicit in the way that you talk about things. Really. Well, okay, if you say so.
So we don't know it's operating. I assume it's other people someplace else in some other part of the country.
No. I promise you, it is happening right now, right here, between the 3 of you. In these last 10, 11 minutes of this presentation, it is present. Oh, no, it is happening. Don't worry. You've made sure that it is here, and you're working very hard to make sure it sticks around a lot longer than we need it to.
But not me. And I think that started when I was a student, Dr. Parker. I think that whole notion of that there are bad racist white people out there somewhere. Not anybody I know, certainly not in Northern California. My family didn't own slaves. We're Italian. Like, we immigrated here. Like, this got nothing to do with us, right?
Well, you're absolutely right. It's got nothing to do with you. Do you or did you assess people on the basis of race? Did you treat people differently on the basis of race? Did you assume some sort of flaw or some sort of superiority in a person on the basis of race? Did you do any of these things? Did you truly believe any of these things while you were growing up? Did your family teach you these things while you were growing up? Did they behave in that way? If the answer is no, then you weren't. So why go back on that perfectly reasonable perspective? Why?
Right? We sort of thought it was you all out on the East Coast were having to deal with all of this, and we had sort of escaped it on the West Coast, which is an absolute lie.
Oh, it's an absolute lie. Yes. Yeah, there is racism in the world. There will always be racism in the world. The question is, are you participating in an active way? Are you treating people badly because of what they look like? Well, you might not have when you were growing up, but it sure sounds like you are now.
But it was my education. And so that's one part. I think the other part I want to say about white students, because Jenna and I have the opportunity. So I teach in the graduate school at Lewis and Clark.
You teach at the graduate school. Okay. All right. Thank you, Dex Orion. I am pink, not pasty. Fear me, POCs. Fear me! Yeah, only albinos truly know what whiteness means. Right? Something like that. I guess. I mean, if we're going to be having racial identities and everything. And Jeanette E. Hellis says, hello. Well, hello, Jeanette. Good morning. All right.
So I have the opportunity to observe teachers and principals who are working forward in their degree, and
watch them in their natural habitat, watching them while white.
To get different licenses. We also run racial affinity groups.
Oh, racial affinity groups! Yay! Okay. Oh, thank goodness. I mean, when you were talking about keeping white teachers with white students, I wasn't sure, but now, oh, sweet, sweet salvation. Racial affinity groups, tell me more about your intentional segregation.
Here in the Pacific Northwest. And so I get to talk to young white students, like 9 and 10-year-olds, all the time.
9 and 10-year-olds. Okay, 9 and 10-year-olds. That's like what? 4th or 5th grade? Something like that? Okay, so you're talking elementary school. Okay. Tell me more about these racial affinity groups in elementary schools.
And what's so interesting is that there's such a fear that we're going to guilt and shame white kids if we talk to them about race. That's going to make them feel guilty and shameful.
Oh, of course. There's no fear of that. When you start imposing onto them that they are inherently flawed, that they might inherently think they are good people, but really, they have a lot to make up for down the line of things that they were never involved in as 9 or 10-year-olds.
And I always say, you know what they feel bad about?
Tell us, empath, mind reader, psychic. What do they feel bad about?
They feel guilty and shameful about?
Oh, so they do feel guilt and shame?
Feel bad about racism.
You divvy kids up on the basis of their skin color, right? And you're not there to guilt or shame them or anything. And you know what they really feel bad about? It's about racism. Oh, do they? Do you feel bad about racism? Like actual racism, the racism that you are perpetuating, the racism that you are constructing through your teaching models of racial identitarianism? Good gravy, lady. Are you listening to yourself?
They know it's operating. They see their friends of color being treated in different ways.
Oh, could it be because they are told to see them as friends of color? Do you think that maybe they're being instilled with some kind of notion that they should look at everybody on the basis of race because you're referring to an entire multitude of demographics as separate from they are? Sorry, my grammar just exploded because my brain is so angry right now. Okay, let's take a break for a second. Thank you, Johnny Hellcat. These talks always pull the line. Oh, my lucky stars, a necro every single time. This infuriates me. If you couldn't tell, listen to the cognitive dissonance in this person's mind playing itself out right in front of you. Friends of color. Racial affinity groups. Racialized identity. Oh, we're not trying to guilt these white kids into feeling bad about what they look like. No, we just have to have them know that there's a difference between them and their friends of color. Thank you, Dax O'Ryan. Don't have friends of color, just colorful friends. There you go. Hey, imagine that. Just assessing people on who they are and not what they are. Isn't that crazy? Didn't mean to click on that, but I'll read it anyway. Mike R., I don't think this woman knows much about anything. She is jumping through hoops to make this all sound like she's on the quote-unquote right side of history on this, but she's the one talking about racial affinity groups, which is just a fancy way of saying racial segregation in schools. Good gravy.
They watch the adults turning themselves inside out, not able to deal with racial issues.
Not able to deal with racial issues. How about setting race aside and deal with people as they are individually? Could you imagine a world like that for a second?
And they want tools. They want information.
Yeah.
They want it to be explicit.
Yeah.
And they want to know how they can be anti-racist.
Right. This is the kids. Yeah, 9 and 10-year-olds are the ones ushering this forward. You're right. You're simply there as a facilitator. You're just a servant. You are deferring to the wisdom of 9-year-olds, because 9-year-olds really care about race and racial issues, and they want tools, you see. They want explicit information on how they can be better white people. That's what 9 and 10-year-olds are focused on. Not the next cartoon show they're going to watch, not playing Fortnite, not the toys they've got, right? Not playing with their friends in the mud. No. They really, really want to know and have the tools for dealing with races and race. Oh, boy. And who are you? Who are you to deny them what they are asking you to provide them? Right? You're not the adult in the room. You're simply a waiter. Right? They give you their order and you just fulfill it, and you go through all the hoops necessary to make that happen. Oh yeah, no, it's the kids, guys. The kids want this. They need this. They're so aware. Guys.
One piece we added in the book, and we also have it on the website, is we've started to generate a whole list of white anti-racist activists. Because so often white kids, when we ask them, when was the first time you knew you were white at school?
When was the first time you knew you were white at school? Okay, I don't know. What does a 9 or 10-year-old say to that, I wonder?
The most popular answer we get is in conversations in elementary school when they were talking about Dr. King. And that when they learned about Dr. King, they learned that a white person murdered Dr. King, which is true. But they said, so I think the message was that all white people are racist.
Oh, was that the message? Well, the teacher was doing a very poor job there, weren't they? Because if you can believe it, there were white people in the civil rights movement. There were white people who died at the hands of other white people in the civil rights movement. Did you know that? Do you teach that to kids too? Did you? Huh? Or I should say with the teachers that you're talking about. Oh, okay.
That was sort of the takeaway.
Well, I mean, isn't that what you're teaching kids right now? Is that not the takeaway from your book?
And so we really know that we want white kids to understand they have a race, to understand their own racialized identities and history,
their own racialized identity and history. Okay, well, you tell me how a 9-year-old today, who just happens to be white, has some sort of mystic cord of memory to the guy that shot Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Is that part of their history? Is that part of their racialized identity? If you're not monolithing an entire demographic like that, then what are you talking about?
Understand that people have different racial backgrounds before they start digging into issues of racism and ethnocentrism, so that they have a sense of themselves in that conversation.
Ethnocentrism, and you're promoting racial affinity groups and friends of color.
And then they can see the bigger picture. And most importantly, learn about white people who have stood with people of color, who have always fought against racism. Right? But how do we be in solidarity? And white children, when I ask them, can you name one white person, dead or alive, who's working for racial justice? They often give me a blank stare.
Because they're 9 and 10-year-olds. They don't care about any of that stuff. And what were those white people standing beside black people in the civil rights movement? What were they working towards? What sentiment? What philosophy were they working towards? A world where, what was it from the I Have a Dream speech? Huh? Right? Assess people on the basis of the content of their character and not the color of their skin, where their skin color is an irrelevancy. Irrelevancy. It is as relevant to assessing someone as their eye color or their hair color. That is the world that they were working towards. And you bring this up, and you completely miss the point, and you are working actively against it. Good gravy. How willfully blind do you have to make yourself to do this? Oh yeah, and you think you're good people. You see how everything they're talking about is kind of just an actual reflection of what they're actually doing. You're moving through the world. You don't think about race, but you think you're good people. Well, we talk about race and we think we're good people.
They don't have an answer, right?
You're right, because they're 9 and they're 10. You're talking about 4th or 5th graders here.
White teachers too, often no answer to that question, right? And that scares me, because then we have no model of who we're supposed to be, right?
We have no model of who we're supposed to be. Oh, okay. So if I can't name a white person working for social justice or racial justice, then I have no idea how to behave. I can't take the sentiments of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. and just go with that, because he's not white. I have no way to behave because I can't think or assess or accept anything said by anybody who doesn't look slightly like I do. No. I can't value someone's principles regardless of what they look like. I can't value a stance in life just on the basis that it makes the most sense to me, regardless of who said it. No. I can't think or behave or learn or model myself without someone who looks just like me there telling me what to do. Fuck me.
Right? And then I think people are paralyzed and they don't know what to do, and they throw their hands up and they say, "Oh, racism." And then it all just cycles around again.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, I would just add that we interview white students all over the country for the podcast, and I think there's this myth, I know there's this myth that racism is a generational issue, that kids don't deal with it the way we do. And what we hear time and time again is white students saying, "I don't want to say the wrong thing," imitating exactly what we hear adults saying.
And who... Yeah, it's a generational thing. Yeah, because what do kids do? When kids have it drilled into their heads that anything they say, do, or otherwise, simply on the basis of being white, could have them accused of being a villain, whose fault is that? Did I just hear... What... This is Kyle. Thank you so much. I have a 9-year-old little sister. The only time she has ever brought up race was after seeing a BLM commercial. She asked, "Why do only Black lives matter? I'm sick of these people creating racism." Yeah. We're watching it right here. We're watching the mental athletics taking place in people who think that they're somehow curing something when they're just perpetuating it. I mean, we talked to white kids all across the country, and we don't the thing we hear all the time is they're so scared to say something, the wrong thing. So we take them all into a group, all by themselves, separated from their friends of color, and we talk to them about their racial identity and their racial history, and really make them focus on their skin color, so they feel even more uncomfortable going out into the world because they know that there's a barrier between them and everybody else who doesn't look like them because of their skin color. And we wonder, why do they get so scared over saying the wrong thing? Now, if I had like just a background noise of just the WTF thing going off perpetually for this episode, it would. I'm not gonna, but it would.
And this is what keeps us up at night, because if we...
Oh, I'm sure it keeps you up at night. I'm sure white kids being scared about their own race keeps you up at night, because that means more book sales. Good God.
We have another generation of white students who are incapable of talking about race, then nothing changes. And
incapable of talking about race. What a terrible world it would be. What a terrible, terrible world it would be if we were all just incapable of talking about race, and we could talk about real things like things that affect all of us as people. Right? The things of human solidarity, not racial division. Oh, God. Man, where does this come from? Where does it... I mean, why does this keep happening? I don't know.
So that really is one of the driving missions of the work that we do. How do we set up white students to be able to not only withstand some racial stress, but actually start to talk in depth and dismantle racism.
Dismantle racism? Oh, God. Ah.
You know, like, I'm taking notes, and that's why I'm like, oh, and I know it's recorded, but it's so good. This is so good.
Is it really? Is it good? Why is it good? What's so good about it? I would honestly like to know.
So if there's a delay, it's because I'm like, my notes. And just to that end, I was just thinking about how you're talking about how white folks can be in solidarity. Could you just name some? Just so it's out there in the air floating so people will know that there are some.
Oh, sure. My one, because she was Italian American, so
you're not going to bring up you're going to bring up the lady that was killed at the bridge during the civil rights movement, aren't you? It was, oh, dang it. I want to say it was like Violet or Lizetto or something. Oh, God, what was her name? You're going to bring her up, aren't you? You're going to bring up one of the martyrs of the civil rights movement, aren't you?
She was the first Italian American white woman that I'd heard about. Her name was Viola Liuzzo.
That's what it was. Yes, yeah. She was killed by Ku Klux Klan members, I think down in, I want to say Alabama. I might be off on that. But yeah. You know, I learned about her years ago. But that's the first one you come up with. You're not going to think of someone today? Why don't you think of someone today? Okay, so yeah, an actual hero of the civil rights movement, someone who dedicated her life to trying to reach racial equality, and she was killed by white people, all right? Of course you're going to bring her up. You're not going to name somebody from today? The same question you would ask a 9 or 10-year-old? Okay.
And I don't know that a lot of folks know her, but she was living in Michigan. She saw Dr. King down at the Pettus Bridge and watched what happened, and she's like, I'm going to Selma. And so she went down and she actually drove people to go and be able to register to vote. Yeah. She was actually murdered by the Ku Klux Klan while she was driving a group of African Americans to vote. Yep. But it's so powerful for me to see another person who looks like me, right?
You know, your anecdote was true and it's tragic. And then you had to bring in looks like me. You couldn't just value her on her actions, could you? Right? If she'd been black, if she'd been Chinese, would you have the same feeling? And if not, what does that say about you? Why can't you value her for her sacrifice? You couldn't even go a minute, could you?
Who was able to say, you know what, this is not okay, and I have a role to play, and so I've loved learning about her.
Oh, I love that.
Yeah.
Jenna, do you want to share any? Or
well, I just was thinking about the march in Selma.
Yeah. So, can you name another white civil rights figure? There
was a rumor that Dr. King was going to be assassinated, and they decided, the leadership of that march decided, well, since white people can't tell us apart anyway, let's put all the black men in blue suits so that they can't figure out which one is Dr. King. And so a bunch of white men who were on that march gave up their blue suit jackets. And to me, this is the perfect metaphor. So on the one hand, they were marching, they were there in solidarity, and also what was required of them was so little, to give up a blue suit jacket and their lives were never in danger, right?
Oh, their lives are never in danger. Oh, white men's lives were never in danger during the civil rights movement? Really? Really? Are you sure about that?
They were giving it to other black men so that they could potentially take the bullet. So I think about that a lot.
Yeah.
But you can't name anybody. You don't have any names you can give out. The question that you would challenge a 9 or 10-year-old with, you yourself cannot answer. Okay.
And I think, I know in your book you really talk about like how do you use these moments and these examples to really think about like what's the work, and that's I took away that was really, really powerful to have.
Oh, yeah,
so
yeah, the work.
I think that people who are reading this will have this really nice set of action steps also to do something.
Like what? Like set up racial affinity groups? Like what exactly is the point of the book? What is it? I know I'm asking rhetorically. What is it that the authors hope will be the change state between someone who reads the book and then after they're done reading the book? Right? Educator X reads the book. What do you hope they are going to take with them from that book or do in difference to what they were doing before?
I also love, I love many things about this book. And I particularly love how you stage the systems of whiteness to demonstrate how schools are raced and have a racial identity, which I didn't really, I was like, that's right.
Well, that's right. Schools do have a racial identity. Yeah, because I can see people with skin.
Absolutely. So I wonder if you could talk about why you staged it this way and what you're hoping folks really get from that.
Yes.
I'm actually going to read a little excerpt, if that's okay, just to give some context about what we're talking about.
Oh, please do, because I've been waiting for context this entire time.
Yes.
So we use Dr. Janet Helm's stages of racial identity development to talk about individual racial identity development. And in the book, we sort of toggle back and forth between the individual and the systemic.
Oh, between the individual and the systemic, but you all whittle it down to skin color. Oh, okay. All right. Thank you, Johnny Hellcat. Again, Selma is a good movie, but the review my lefty friend gave it was equal to people watching Passion of the Christ. It was good, but not that good. I've never seen it. I've seen several movies about the civil rights movement or the terrors of the Old South and things like that, but I haven't seen it, so I'll take your word for it. But then again, I don't think that there's. I think there's a lot of value in watching the actual documentaries made of. I mean, it's not like it was an era that there wasn't any kind of news coverage or archival footage or anything, or a lot of press. We're not talking about like ancient history, so to speak. Actual documentaries that have film footage of the actual movement and the speeches and the marches and the events therein. Those are good. Those are good all by themselves. I don't really understand a lot of the remakes of everything, and there's plenty of material there you don't have to dramatize, I guess I should say. Anyway.
Because a lot of times people get bogged down on the individual, and other times people want to avoid talking about the individual and go straight to policies and practices and never think about their own involvement, and it's like whack-a-mole. So we need to do both things at the same time.
Uh-huh.
And we were thinking of ways to illustrate the ways that whiteness shows up in schools.
Okay, here. This is what I'm waiting for. I want you to give me examples of how someone's skin color shows up in schools in some existential sense. Because I assume you're not talking just the literal sense.
And we talked about characteristics of white supremacy culture, and we thought about that, but just wanted to give a snapshot. And just as though in our personal racial identity development, it changes from time to time, day to day, and hour to hour, and even what space we are in, that is also true for institutions. So just to give a little context, we want to illustrate the contours of how whiteness often operates as unnamed, unmarked, and passes for normal, not only for individuals, but for educational institutions.
Passes for normal. Okay, so all white people are inherently, whether they know it or not, disingenuous. They're false in some way. Okay.
Similar to the way many white people struggle with I'm racist versus I'm not racist, institutions can be limited in their perspective of what it means to be anti-racist. Thus, we want to offer Helm's 2019 stages as a jumping off point to locate particular institutional behaviors that can be observed, named, and used as indicators of where an educational institution needs to direct its anti-racist efforts. The focus on behavior also helps us to assess and evaluate our efforts to make institutions less racist.
Yeah, by the way, let me tell you about our racial affinity groups. Let me tell you about how I think that white teachers need to teach white students. That's in your book too, isn't it?
In education, we value what we can measure, and so our efforts to challenge racism need to include a similar delineation of skills that can be observed, evaluated, and refined over time. We know that individuals come to understand their racial identity via experiences over time, and schools too need to understand and grapple with their racial identity as institutions. They have their own collective racial identity, which will impact policies and procedures, curricular initiatives, recruitment and retention efforts, and other systemic issues.
Oh, it will? Okay. Do you have any active examples of this for us?
Change requires an unflinching look at the places our behavior may not align with our beliefs, and educational institutions need to be clear about the gaps between espoused beliefs in racial equity and the realities on campus. When applied more broadly to predominantly white institutions, the stages of racial identity development can point to inconsistencies and areas for strategic anti-racist interventions.
Wow, that's a lot of words. Do you have like a, I don't know, active example of what you're talking about?
So I think it's just that. When we're able to see and measure and define how our schools are operating, then we have some strategy versus, oh, we're going to put out a letter, we're going to start a new PD program. What are the indicators? Why are you making those decisions, and what is it based on? So
yes, well, that's what I'm waiting to hear. What are the indicators? You've dropped a lot of verbiage that says nothing. What is an indicator that you've come across in your years of study and talking to white students in affinity groups? What is an indicator of a problem? And then how do you propose to solve for that problem?
So it gives us a way to have some objective measures and also just think more strategically of the work we're doing in schools.
Like the work, like
yeah,
what?
I mean, I went through the list and was like, oh, I've been there. I felt sometimes I felt a little triggered and traumatized.
You felt a little triggered and traumatized by what? Tell me what? Am I gonna have to like find a copy of this thing? Oh Lord.
Those stages when you live through them, particularly as a Black person. Yes.
Yes, what?
So I thought it was quite
what?
Thoughtful.
Like what?
I thought to see it sort of laid out. I think lots of schools can locate themselves in there and have really important conversations about, yes, our school is a raced and racist place, and what can we do about it?
Oh, yeah. If we see these signs, whatever they are, because they haven't told us yet, in our school, then obviously we're a racist institution, and we have to have these conversations. Are they courageous conversations? Do we need to get Glenn Singleton in here for that? Oh, boy.
Yeah.
Okay. And then,
Elizabeth, do you have any thoughts about the staging?
Oh, yeah, Elizabeth, you're my hero so far in this one, because you've been the most unveiled in your thinking process. So lay it on me.
Well, it was really fun, not fun, it was challenging, but it was interesting.
That's why I'm smiling.
To sort of name the different qualities because we gave examples for each stage.
Yes.
And I think what's so interesting, and it's what you're saying, Dr. Parker, it's like, how do you be in your place out where you're working, right? And you can read this and it's so familiar.
Well, it's kind of like a horoscope, you know? You ever read a horoscope before? How is it so familiar? Well, when you start talking in broad generalizations of things, occasionally you might hit upon something that sounds familiar to somebody. Are you kidding me right now?
And it was so easy for Jenna and I to come up with these examples, right?
Yeah,
and so I think to me it always
like?
just reinforces, like, the system of racism is a beast. It is nuanced and it just runs 24/7.
Yeah.
And if we are not like up to the task, like if we do not have analytical skills and tools and the ability, we will just make little tweaks and changes, waste a lot of time and effort, change a lot of things around, like the edges. without ever actually changing the center of what schools do. And so that's why we wanted to focus in the book on curriculum and pedagogy and assessment and recruitment and retention, all these things that schools say, that they want to be committed to, yet we just saw these things operating. And it's, I appreciate you saying how much it resonated. And we've heard from other educators around the country, they're like, yep, my school too, which just lets me know, like, it's a system and we can.
It's very affirming. Now, we won't tell you on this broadcast, apparently, what we're even talking about. Can you give some of these examples? Are you going to give some of these examples? Can you give a success story? I ask this very often, those of you that listen to my streams before. And people who have offered up some great solution to something or some stunning insight into a problem, you must have a success story where you took someone who is in the terrible state of X and through your teachings you brought them to the better state of Y. Are you going to give us anything like that? You still got half an hour to go.
Can get smart and we can recognize it and we can be better at dismantling it, but we have to be able to name it first.
Well, then name it. Give us...
Yeah, and too, I think what happens is that, and you've talked about this, people get stuck. They name it and then they think, well, what next? And what I appreciate, and I think also readers will appreciate, is throughout the book, there are these really useful supports that enable readers to do something immediately.
Like?
So if possible, can you talk about these sort of stopping points, reflective moments, and then I want to know, are there ones that you've included that are your favorites?
my favorite stopping point in curing people of racism. What's my favorite stopping point? What?
So like moments where we've been able to do sort of that institutional, like that institutional analysis and like made a change based on that.
Yes. How about an actual example?
Yeah, or actually, at the end, each section has like an activity or a reflection. They're all, I thought them as a reflection and do something. And so I wondered, can you talk about like how you made those decisions? And then also, if for all the ones that you've included, is there any ones that you think this is the one I really, really love?
Love it. I got you. Okay, Jen, I'd like to share two, and then if you have others. One thing, and I want to thank Paul Gorski, one of our series editors, for this suggestion about including the case studies.
Yes, case studies. Are you going to give us one?
Which are mainly in the second half of the book. But Jenna and I are huge fans of case studies. One, we have so many of them because
such as
stuff happens all the time. But it's such a great pedagogical tool for schools because you're not in the hot moment when you're faced with something. You can be in a moment, think it through, and it's like, what would you do? And so I think our case study approach, I think readers will find really helpful, hopefully very familiar, but also have provided sets of guiding questions then to walk you through. So what would you do? And the hope is then if you get a similar situation, it'll be like, oh, this is like that case study that we did, right?
Oh my God. There's a previous example that I can learn from. Great. Okay, what is it?
And then you sort of have a plan. The other thing that I really appreciate, because I think it reflects our style, is what we call our what questions. And they're basically...
I'm having a lot of what questions myself.
Basically, white, anti-racist teaching questions. So if I want to...
White, anti-racist teaching. Oh, it was an acronym? What questions? What? White, anti-racism teaching questions. Oh, very specific. Okay, well, lay on me these whats.
To see myself as a white anti-racist teacher, what are the questions I should be asking myself and asking my institution?
I don't know. Tell us.
We tried to take an inquiry approach to sort of get away from, Jen and I always talk about sometimes white folks, when they decide they want to be anti-racist, can be really good at sort of pointing fingers at other people and pointing out how racist all the other white people are.
You know how those white people are. Always blaming other people for their problems. Every white person you come across, they just deflect and deflect and deflect. But we know better, don't we? We know about those whites.
Except for them. had those moments, been there, done that. And so really having a way that we can sort of slow down, have a little more humility, be curious, ask questions.
Yes, because as we know, there are no humble white people, there are no curious white people. They're all egotistical racists.
That we hope will bring more white people to the table and will get more white folks talking to each other. So,
you know what really brings white people to the table? A black light. And I don't mean that as a pun. I mean, like, one of those bug zappers. Yeah, they get mesmerized by that. I learned this in watching The Fly 2. Okay? If you watch The Fly 2 and you see Seth Brundle's son and he's laying there and he's just kind of like mesmerized by the bug light, that's when I knew how you attract white people. Right? By that sort of cobalt purple glow. That just mesmerizes them. Okay, that was a very deep cut reference, but I can't help myself.
This is a list of 6 questions, and I'll just sort of share them because I think it gives you a good sense of how we would provide sort of a framework for folks to walk through and think about ways that they could strengthen their anti-racist practice.
All right.
So the first question is, how does racial diversity in a classroom support learning outcomes?
How does racial diversity in a classroom support outcomes?
And that's sort of the value of racial difference. So often we're operating from a deficit model, and also I think we're operating from a fear model. And like, oh no, now we need to talk about race.
Well, you were operating on a fear model when you went into your ethnic studies class and you did harm because you didn't know your racial identity. How is that any less of a fear model? Are you not operating on a fear model now? Aren't you supposed to be taking into account everybody's lived experiences on the basis of their skin color before you even have an interaction with them? It's all about fear. What are you talking about?
Right, and it becomes this like heavy downer, dramatic thing that's going to happen. And we don't think about what is the value of racial difference and
what is the value of racial difference? I don't know, anti-racist lady. You tell me how I am supposed to value people on the difference of their skin color.
How do we hone and support that in our classrooms and leverage it, right?
How do you leverage racial difference? I don't know, maybe racial affinity groups?
So part of it is, do we understand why racially heterogeneous classrooms where we're talking and actively thinking about race, why that raises the academic achievement of all the students in the classroom? So we start there. The second.
Wait, what? What?
About race, why that raises the academic.
No, wait, sorry.
Think about what is the value of racial difference and how do we hone and support that in our classrooms and leverage it, right? So part of it is, do we understand why racially heterogeneous classrooms where we're talking and actively thinking about race, why that raises the academic achievement of all the students in the classroom? So we start.
Okay, just for everyone's edification and all right, heterogeneous, of different origin, not from the same source, individual, or species. So, talking about race amongst a classroom of diversified students raises academic achievement. Really? How do you measure that? Do you have a control classroom where they don't talk about race and compare it to one that does? Do you have different classrooms made up of different types of people and do the same thing? How did you arrive at that conclusion? I wonder.
Start there. The second one is, how do we come to understand what it means to be white?
Oh, I don't know. What does it mean to be white?
That's sort of our racial identity development question.
Yeah.
Number 3 is, what gets in the way of healthy racial identity development?
I don't know.
So now we can think about racism, systems, how prejudice works, what's the role of stereotypes, right? I've got a place to...
What are the role of stereotypes? Tell me, what are the role of stereotypes?
Sort of put some of those things that can interrupt healthy racial identity development for white students, so they don't get a sense of internalized superiority.
Yeah, we got to make sure they don't have an internalized superiority over their race. So how we're going to do that? We're going to focus on their race and tell them that their race inherently makes them flawed. Right? That their race makes them inherently guilty of things. They have to watch their step with what they say to other people between them and their friends of color.
And for students of color, so they don't get a sense of internalized oppression and start to believe, oh, it must just be something about me that's making my teacher always give me the answer or not ask me to finish the homework or allow me to like skip out of class and never say anything to me.
Oh, really? Well, because, I just did a little show a couple of weeks ago where the entire school system had decided to meter out the grading scale on the basis of diversity. You guys remember this? Yeah. Shelby County schools or Memphis schools. Yeah, where they had a new grading system and they were going to employ it using a diversity model.
Oh, this is something else is going on. Then we have where and how do racist attitudes, language, and behavior show up in schools? So that's sort of identification and data. So where might racism be operating, right, in your school?
Yeah, where might it be? I mean, if you had to guess, you don't know if it is, and it's, it's sometimes very subjective depending, but where would it be? We're not going to assume, first and foremost, that there isn't anybody being racist. We're going to assume that there is, and you have to tell us, where do you find that? Where do you think it exists? Who are you going to tell on?
Number 5, how do we address racial stereotypes and racism? Sort of the skill development. So let's get in there and know what you're going to do and what you're going to say when that thing gets said in the middle of your class.
Like what white people do? Right, what you told us a couple minutes ago. When white people are faced with this, they XYZ PDQ. Yeah, those kind of stereotypes. When do they pop up in your life, might I ask? How do you apply a racial filter to your assessment of people every day? Do you do this own work on your own somewhere?
Don't be a deer in the headlights. Be like, oh, yes, that's a racial stereotype. Wow, that just made me uncomfortable. Let's talk through that, right? And we have a way to sort of address it when it happens. And then the last one is, how do we create and model anti-racist pedagogy and curricula, and that sort of teaching and coaching practices? So again, we try to start with the positive and end with the positive, right? How do we...
Yeah, this is all very positive. It's all very positive. It's all very introspective. It's all very accusatory. And then how are you going to change yourself to model yourself after what we've told you think? Now that you've gone on a witch hunt to find within yourself your racial identity, to find within yourself your unknown racism, to find within your school where racism exists, how are you going to help to cure that through our philosophy? Now, yeah, it's very, very effective questionnaire. Yeah.
How do we be in a place that we can sort of create and sustain sort of anti-racist curriculum development via what we're teaching as well as how we're teaching? So those are our what questions. Yeah,
white anti-racist teaching questions. Yeah, that's great. That's clever. That's so clever.
My favorite is we offer some role plays, and the hill I will likely die on is to interrupt white silence. And so a lot of the work we do in our workshops
tell me again about stereotypes. White silence, huh? Okay.
Is about just practicing. What does it look like? How do we interrupt these moments that go by 50 times a day at school? And sometimes we're aware of them, sometimes we're not. But how do we slow things down? How do we actually respond in the moment?
I don't know. How do you walk on eggshells throughout your entire day looking for things that might be racist, trying to read the minds and intentions of others in order to be a really good social justice warrior? I don't know. How does that work? Do you have time enough to eat during all of this work?
And the research shows that if you actually practice and role play, which is something I hate, by the way, I hate role playing, but
really? Really? Because you're playing the role of a racist pretty good right now.
We do it, our odds of actually intervening in a real moment increase exponentially.
Okay.
So
Like?
I really think it's one of the most valuable tools is having white people practicing how they're going to talk to other white people, not in a way to shame them and tell them they're racist.
No, not in a way to shame them and tell them they're racist, but just to point out to them when they're giving in to racial stereotypes, when they're saying things that are offensive, right? No, we have to have them police themselves because obviously white people, they can't take care of themselves. We need to train them to police themselves because who's going to listen to another white person but a white person, right? I mean, when it comes from someone who looks like you, it means more, right?
But how do we bring more white people to the table, lean in with curiosity, and how do we respond in those moments?
Yeah, how do we?
Yes, I love the role play, and I love the roles. Isn't one of them like the mistake maker?
Yeah.
It's like, oh, yes.
Could you elaborate for the sake of those of us that haven't read the book yet? What are you talking about? The mistake maker? You mean like all human beings?
And again, there are so many tools that I feel like you can't say that you don't know what to do after you read this book, right? You really can't. Like if you don't, then
okay,
I don't know what to tell you because
okay,
there's everything probably you could think of. You all have proactively provided,
such as
a resource, and I think it comes from your robust working with such a broad range of folks.
Oh, a broad range of folks, like white kids 9 and 10 years old in racial affinity groups
too. So I that comes through in your expertise and your investment in making sure that more white people, I love how you said, are coming to the table and leaning in and staying at the table. I think the book also helps them stay at the table.
I thought it was only white people at the table. I thought that was the constant complaint, that there wasn't a place at the table for anybody different. But now the white people are coming to the table. They weren't at the table before, but now they're at the table. This table. The anti-racist table. The white anti-racist table. It's a what table?
But not run away. And Jen, I love how you said the hill I will likely die on.
It's
interrupting white silence. I've been there when that happened. It's great.
No, yeah,
it's great. And you know, as a Black person who is in those situations, I think that the more.
How about as you, as a Black person? Okay, the three of you do not represent anything other than yourselves. Do you understand that? To say otherwise goes against the idea of racial equality. It's just...
White people will actually do things.
Yeah, white people
and do them
things,
and continue to do them.
Yeah.
I feel like that's the only way we're going to really get anywhere.
Yeah, we've got to stop those white people from acting that way.
I want you to talk a little bit about the role of white parents.
Parents? Look how excited she is. She's so happy that was brought up. And I am too, honestly. Because, again, one of my constant refrains throughout these things. How often are parents actually brought up in these educational, crusades? We've only got a couple of minutes left before the bottom of the hour, so let's give her a couple of seconds here and see what she says.
How might they begin racial literacy conversations with her white children, and why do those conversations matter? And also, I often hear that question. At what age do you begin having these conversations?
Yeah, when can parents start making their children paranoid about saying or doing anything when it comes to anybody who doesn't look exactly like they do? And then I'm so amazed when I go out into the country and talk to small children about what they think about race, and they're all scared about saying the wrong thing. God, what should parents do to instill in their children the notion that they have to police each other on what they might or might not say or how it might or might not be interpreted? And then we go out and wonder why there's a problem of that amongst children. Oh my gosh, it's just a vicious circle, isn't it?
Early and often, as early as possible.
Yes,
and I know that's daunting for a lot of folks, and a lot of parents who didn't, and then they have adult children are like, oh, I screwed up. But
yeah, those adult children that I didn't focus on race enough during the course of their growing up. Oh no.
it's never too late. We need to encourage our children to talk to their children. This needs to be part of our regular conversation as white folk. And so one of the starting places is to talk about how your whiteness, your race, was talked about or impacted you or didn't as you were growing up, and telling those stories to our kids.
Yeah, because if race impacted you or didn't impact you, it's still worthwhile to talk about race. Okay.
And again, naming whiteness, that it's not the default. If we read a book by a white author, I'm going to name that author as white and not just assume that it is white unless I tell you otherwise, right?
What?
That's a big starting point that worked for me and my children, hopefully. And then another thing is just pointing out those racial stereotypes, myths. I mean, I remember about gender, about all of it, talking about some of the mouse shows that my kids watched when they were little. Like,
you just referred to an entire swath of people as white folk, and now you want to talk about stereotypes? We as white folk. Oh, for God's sake. Okay. I'm done with this for now. I don't know if I'm going to do a part 2. I don't know if there's any use to doing a part 2, except for the sort of cringy lulls I might get out of it. But for the record, I'm at 32:34 on the video. If you guys have anything you'd like to add before we wrap things up for this Sunday, let me know in the chat. A programming note, I have now firmed up the plans for my experimental true crime stream. Now, this is how this is going to work. All right, I'm going to have it up probably shortly after this is over with. The date will be Sunday, August 28th. So there won't be any Sunday stream per usual that particular Sunday. But Sunday, August 28th at 10 a.m. Pacific time, I have so far scheduled, right? I have scheduled in human form, all fuzzed out, and stay awake. 3 true crime channels, although in human form has quite a variety, but he does true crime as well. And so what the idea of this show is to bring on true crime creators from the multitudes of YouTube and just talk about the genre, talk about the process, talk about cases that they're interested in, that kind of thing, and just kind of nerd out for a while on true crime stuff, but as well what it means to be a true crime content creator in addition. So, I have a name for this show. I need to shop it first to Sister Scribe to make sure it's not completely stupid. But once I do that after the show, I'll be posting a link to that and schedule it on here for you guys to save and share and all that good stuff. So that's the plan. More information as it becomes available on everything, and so look forward to that. The name is clever, and I checked. My first thought of a name, I checked, and there was already a podcast out there called that thing. And I was like, oh God, what can I call this? And so I came up with a name. I don't want to give it away in case Sister Scribe tells me it's stupid or something else. But there's no podcast called this out there. So hopefully it'll swing. But that's what's going to happen August 28th, fingers crossed. In the meantime, Tyrannus, Alexandrius, Invictus Soul, Scribelight, why do you do this to yourself? Why do you wade into the cesspools and dive for pearls without a snorkel? Why, Scribe? Well, I could give you the funny answer, but I'll give you the serious answer. The serious answer is that things like this fly under the radar. And I want to, give them, not only a platform for exposure in that sense, but also to inform myself about what's going on. I was talking to somebody not too long ago and about the kind of content that I make and the kind of content that I continue to make. And there was a notion, there always is a notion that there's, there's a time for a particular type of video or type of content. It can be argued, and perhaps accurately so, that the focus on, subjects like what I look at had its heyday in, 2014 through maybe 2017. And then 2018, it became old hat and it's boring now and there's nothing else to say. And in my mind, it's still there and things like this are still going on, and you have people promoting what is, at least to me, I'm happy to have a conversation elsewhere, a courageous conversation. Things that seem to me to be detrimental to not only our society, but more specifically to kids. Watching grown adults smiling and grinning and getting all excited over concepts that are so alien to me from the values I was raised with. And they keep publishing books and they keep promoting this stuff, and I don't know how else to handle it except to listen to what they have to say and call it out for what I see it as. And I don't want to keep my head buried in the sand about things. You know, I don't know. It bugs me. It bugs me. That's why, I guess, in a very broken explanation, but that's the one that I've got. Thank you, Mike R. Yes, part 2, please. My sanity might suffer, but whatever. I'll think about it. Between now and next Sunday, I'll think about it. But yeah, I just to listen to somebody talk so excitedly about divvying kids up on the basis of race and then complaining about racism. Right, and trying, you know, depending on a part 2 or a part 3 of something, moving from subject to subject, from panel to panel, not focusing on one person. It's not like I'm harping on one individual every time I look at these things. I bring in stuff just randomly from where I find it, and it's always different people promoting, oftentimes, nonsense or poison, and they're selling books with it, and they're getting praise for it. And it just, I don't understand. And so I guess I watch to understand. For better or for worse. How do you find presentations about nothing real? I have the magic touch now. You know, I see a headline for something and I go, I wonder what that's about. And then I give it a listen. And then I see 3 or 4 professionals who have been dedicating their lives to something, talking about things that they're very excited about, and it ends up being, excuse me? You know? Or like a TEDx talk where somebody says, I've done years of research, and then they don't provide any examples or any case studies, or they talk in generalities. It's something else. It's something else. Silent B, oh my god, yes, her eyebrows are terrifying. Zool is among us. They're a very accentuating feature. They're very accentuating. Lexi Mads, if you don't do a part 2, how am I supposed to educate myself and become anti-racist? If I do a part 2, I have a feeling they're not going to actually talk about any lessons. That list of questions was just a very brief descent into self-vilification and then turning oneself into an inquisitor. That's all that was. Like, how does racism show up in my school? Not, does racism show up in my school? How does it? You know, already assuming its existence. Then I gotta go find it. And once I find it, now how can I address these things that I've decided are racist? And accuse the people doing it of being racist, whether they know it or not. Witchcraft, everywhere I look. Shadow Sonata, either drag them into the sunlight for all to see, or let it fester and grow in the dark until the infection becomes incurable. That's basically it. That's basically it. And I understand, you know, I'm not changing the world here. You know, and here's the other thing too, and I don't want this to get across. I'm not demanding anybody think the way that I do. Okay, this is why I just react to what I see. And I'm more than happy. I hope you guys know, and I hope you've seen it by now, that when somebody, if I say something or I go off base and someone has a correction or knows something that I don't about something and puts it in the comments or otherwise, and I was off base, you know, because the other part, and I've said this before, there's always the possibility that in watching something that on reflex I think is probably going to turn me off, I might learn something, or more importantly, have my mind changed about something. You know, and that hope may be slim, that possibility may be small, but it always exists, and I don't want to deny that. So there's that. But anyway, a couple more here, and then we'll go on. Lexi, actually my mom bought Kendi's book. I keep meaning to read it so I know exactly what poison he's spreading outside of these talks. Yeah, well, I listened to the man himself, and he whittled it down after being asked 3 times. And I still say to this day, you know, for whatever else, thank goodness for those moderators, those two ladies who interviewed him on that TEDx, for trying to get him to give a straight answer, because they kept asking him, what is anti-racism? And twice at the bat, he gave this long word wall of nothing. And finally, he whittled it down to, you know, saying you're not racist. How did it go again? Oh, yeah. Racism is denial, anti-racism is confession. And since you can't say you're not racist, because everybody's racist, then, yeah, everybody's racist, and anti-racism just confesses your inherent sin. It was very biblical the way he put it. I just butchered it a bit, but... And Tyrannus again, don't ruin my profession. Being an inquisitor and heresy examiner is hard work. Who is going to purge the heathens from the Holy Lands? Who, I say? I know, right? It's a lucrative business. It's a very lucrative business. And... Rib Rascal. It's just unmitigated anti-white animus. It's unmitigated capitalism. And that's not me being an anti-capitalist here. But there is a market for this. That is what's driving this. That's what's driving these guys to have this book in the first place, to sell the book, because it sells. There's a market for it. If you can take something that sounds so ridiculous when you say it out loud, put it down on the written page, and have people buy it, just to have it on their bookshelf or their coffee table to show off how virtuous they are. That's what's driving it. If there wasn't a market for it, if there wasn't a monetary benefit or reward for it, we wouldn't see this nearly as much as we do. But here we are. And this isn't the first book review I've looked at before. One of my earlier videos was a lady who was promoting a book about well-meaning whites. Well-meaning whites. I forget what her last name... Her last name started with an O or something. It was like Oberon or whatever. But either way... Years and years go by and it doesn't stop, but it's becoming more popular and it's becoming more common. That's the other thing too. This is not an outlier. This is not a fringe thing people don't think about, and it's most especially when it comes to schools teaching kids. They wondered why all these kids they were talking to were so scared of what they might say and might be wrong. And we keep seeing that. They say it's a generational thing. And you're teaching parents to teach them to think that way. But somehow they just avoid that? I guess it's also an interesting psychological examination of just how self-denial can turn you into the very thing that you say that you're against. Anyway, everybody, I'm going to call it there. That's all I have for now. I may do a part 2 on this next week. I'll think about it. If something else doesn't pop up between now and then, perhaps so. Otherwise, I hope you all learned something, enjoyed it, such as it is, in its own sort of dark, cynical way. I hope you look forward to the true crime show I have cooking up. I will hopefully have something posted on that in just a little while, and I'll tweet it out once I have it there. Real quick. Whoops. Thank you, Keeverdam. White anti-racist teacher, Wart. Also, woman on bottom left looks like an evil Sigourney Weaver. I don't know. I don't get Sigourney Weaver. I don't know what I get exactly, but yeah, you guys are talking about Zool and everything. But with that, everybody, thank you so much for joining me for this. I know it's not easy. I hope it's somehow beneficial, or at least entertaining. Moderators, thank you for keeping an eye on things. Even though everyone here is so well behaved, you have very little to do. Everybody who donated, either to myself or to the GoFundMe's pinned to the top of the chat box, thank you guys so much for your generosity. I really do appreciate it. But with that, I hope you all have a good rest of your Sunday, a good rest of your weekend. Adabisi, I see you're here. Hey there. Happy Sunday. I hope you are all safe and well. If you are not well, please get well soon, and I will see you on the next one. Take care. Bye-bye.